But I would argue that the Theranos scandal is on par, actually, with Enron, because there's a component to it that the Enron story didn't have, which is that Theranos went live with blood tests that weren't reliable, that were faulty, and put patients in harm's way. And when I exposed the company, it was actually on the cusp of going national with its blood tests. It was about to roll them out to Walgreens' 8,000 other stores. And if that had happened, the chances that someone would have died from either a wrong diagnosis or an unnecessary medical treatment would have skyrocketed.
What would you like to ask her if you had the opportunity?
I would ask her, how were you able to justify, how were you able to rationalize in your mind risking patients' health? How is that acceptable to you?
It was that serious of an issue, that serious of a technology?
Absolutely. I mean, nearly 1 million blood test results have been voided or corrected since my first stories came out. And so you have a lot of people who received a lot of flawed blood test results. And if the company had expanded nationally and its services had been available on every, at every Walgreens, on every street corner, then the chances that someone really would have gotten hurt would have multiplied.
Though she never went so far as to apologize to the thousands of patients whose health Theranos' product had put at risk.
Theranos was not a traditional tech company. It was actually a medical company, a healthcare company, because its device was a blood testing machine that patients and doctors were going to rely on and did rely on for a while for blood tests. And as Elizabeth said at the height of her fame, 70% of medical decisions that doctors make are based on blood tests. When you're in the medical space, in the medical realm, if you deliver a product that doesn't work, then lives are at stake.
Is there any reason to believe that actual individuals died or were harmed by the rollout of Theranos?
It's very hard to get an answer to that question because the correlation between someone having a bad health outcome and a blood test it's very hard to scientifically prove it. That said, I came across more than a dozen examples of patients who'd gotten unreliable test results from Theranos. In most cases, luckily, their doctors were suspicious about these results and sent them, to have their blood redrawn and retested elsewhere. One of the stories that I talk about in the book is that of a real estate agent in Phoenix who had ringing in her ear, and so her doctor had sent her to Theranos to get her blood tested via finger stick, and her results came back, and I think 6 values came back abnormal. And the doctor, given the symptom, which was ringing in the ear, became very concerned that she was on the cusp of a stroke and immediately sent her to the emergency room. The patient spent 4 hours in the hospital and underwent a battery of tests. Finally, the hospital ran her labs again, and they were normal. She then had more tests, MRIs, over the ensuing week until she and her doctor finally came to the conclusion that the Theranos tests had been inaccurate. So that gives you an idea of the health scare that this company put some people through.
Well, John, there's 2 skeins of this book, and I just love it. One is how all these people were fooled, but the other I want to put first. And you have a quote of someone screaming in the audience at one point, "You hurt people." This woman really hurt people, didn't she?
Well, I mean, one of the most outrageous things about this Theranos scandal is the fact that the company went live with its fingerstick tests in Walgreens stores in Northern California and Arizona 5 years ago in the fall of 2013, and knew the 2 people at the top, Elizabeth Holmes and her boyfriend, Sunny Balwani, knew very well that the tests were unreliable. For one thing, the Theranos machine only handled several of the tests, a handful of the tests, and most of the tests were being done on third-party commercial analyzers that they'd modified and hacked to adapt them to small samples. And one of the things they did was they diluted the small droplets of blood to make the volume bigger to accommodate these commercial machines. And that, of course, introduced all sorts of room for error. And in the end, this company had to void nearly 1 million blood test results.
Who knows what could have happened?
Why this was such a big scandal?
First and foremost, I think patients are at the center, right? So Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes rolled out essentially faulty blood testing technology and used it on kids and cancer patients and all sorts of people. That's maybe the most important on the human side.
Up until October 2015, everything was going swimmingly for this company. I mean, there was started to emerge some questions about the technology and some questions about the founders and some questions about the scientists. But overall, I mean, they were raising capital left and right. Everything was going swell. And then in October 2015, something happened that really caused a huge downhill. And they've really been in defense mode ever since then. And we'll go through that. And also, what can we learn? You know, I think one of the big takeaways is we see other companies struggling. We shouldn't applaud that. We should really say, how can we prevent ourselves from going through those same issues? And the key theme of that part of the conversation will be, and this is kind of a surprise to a lot of people when I give this talk, but the key surprise here is Theranos is not the first company to go through this stuff. In fact, most of the violations that the FDA cited within their quality, with their 43 deficiencies, were really things that a lot of medical device companies struggle with. Now, there are some potential allegations of fraud, and that's not something that a lot of companies struggle with. But overall, in terms of just the quality system deficiencies or the quality deficiencies, it's not something that's, it's the first time in the world we've seen this. But because of the press and the way that the press has tackled the story, it really has become something that a lot of people are now starting to learn what a 483 is, what a quality deficiency is, and what do we need to do to resolve them.